Hi guys, welcome back to Chaz's No Bullshit Reptile Advice. Today we've got a request from Ferret Family. If you get a chance, would you give your thoughts on bioactive vivariums for snakes and what species you think would do well in them? Tom Wright, I second Ferret Family's request. I would love to go bioactive for the smaller species I keep in particular. For my trinkets and tricolour hognose, so many mixed reviews out there when it comes to bioactive with snakes. It'd be great to hear your thoughts. I'm not convinced that you actually want to hear my thoughts. Because given the question, it's apparent you're quite open to the idea of bioactive. Traditionally, I am not one of bioactive's biggest fans. Usually, though, that is because of bioactive keepers rather than the theory of bioactive itself. I find bioactive keepers kind of like CrossFitters or vegans, where they've simply got to tell me, go out of their way to tell me that they are bioactive keepers. I don't give a shit whether you're bioactive. I don't give a shit whether you're pseudo-naturalistic. I don't give a shit whether you're clinical. Oh, your animal's healthy. Okay. So, to go back to basics for the people that may be the uninitiated, there's generally three schools of care. There is clinical, pseudo-naturalistic, bioactive. The clinical at one side is basically a triage system traditionally adopted by the Americans, or we call it the American system over here anyway. The Americans are probably all aghast going, what the fuck, we didn't do that. Anyway, shut up. The American style, very clinical newspaper, corrugated cardboard, clinical, cereal boxes, very just rudimentary and basic. Then you had the Europeans, the Germans, Dutch particularly, went straight off the deep end, spending thousands on recreating little slices of the desert or the rainforest. And then Great Britain, somewhere in between, we had this pseudo-naturalistic where we had artificial plants, orchid bark, beech chippings, aspen, and we sort of halfway house between the two. There's been a huge upswell, groundswell, particularly in the UK. As I said before, I can only comment on the UK market. I can't comment on the US market about this bioactive stuff, and shops opening up with bioactive in their name. And, you know, it's there's obviously a definite movement towards that sort of stuff. There are some issues for me, however, and that is one with the keepers of bioactive. You're just too forceful with it and you chuck it down people's necks, and I don't like stuff being chucked down by neck. And if and when that happens, I'll just tell you to fuck off. That's pretty much the way it's going to work. If I come round to an idea or an experiment and idea myself, that's fine, but I am stubborn. I do not like being told, you've got to do it, you've got to do it. If you don't do it, you're a Neanderthal, you're a blah, 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 blah. It's like, okay, I'm a Neanderthal. But, you know, my snakes are happy and they feed, and, you know, my tanks don't look shit. All right, they're not truly naturalistic, but then what is, I'll get to that in a minute, because you know, all of that leaf litter and stuff you collected from your local backyard or woods, that shit's not naturalistic either. It's natural, it's not naturalistic for the animal being kept. Difference. So for me, yeah, okay, we've got bioactive. What I struggle with is, even on substrates will come with certain warnings. Arcadia produce a load of different substrates. On the back of that, if your animal is ill, or is, you know, there's some sort of immunosuppression going on, don't use this substrate. So what we've got straight away is an open admission that bioactive is for animals that are have a strong immunoresponse, are settled, and have been introduced to bioactive, and therefore their immune response continues to get stronger. See, the argument goes is, if we keep something clinical and super clean, we create immunosuppression. Because there's no incursions on the immune system gets lazy, if you will, and doesn't fight infection as well, but it doesn't really need to, because we keep the tank so clean. Then halfway house would be like sort of pseudo-naturalistic, where we've got some background pathogens. And the argument with the bioactive is we're going to kind of leave it to try and run itself as a little biosphere, and we have isopods turning around dead leaf litter and fecal material, and it enters this life cycle. But the pathogen levels and background pathogen levels in those vivariums is far higher than the other two. So if your animal has a question mark over its health, the bioactive could be a real threat because it just can't deal with the pathogens. When we refer to the bacteria that's held inside an animal's stomach, we call that common cell. And common cell bacteria means that it's part of its normal gut flora and fauna. When we set up a tank with background levels of pathogens, how would we know that those gut flora and gut fauna are not threatened by the pathogen levels we've built up? Do we know what the pathogens are that are built up? Do we know what our nitrate and nitrite levels within the soil are? There's 101 different questions. See, we want to get the plants growing and we want the lights on, and we've got to try and get this cycle, get the plants to root and take shape, and people try and rush the process of doing bioactive when in actual fact it takes months, because you've got to let it go through a mold process. There'll be mushrooms, there'll be fur, there'll be all sorts, and that's got to come and go. If we just throw the tank together and then the snake's in 5 minutes later, it's going through the mold process while the animal's in there, which means fungal spores, bacterial spores, which your animal's breathing in, which is less than ideal, I hope, obviously. So it's working from where do you want to go with it? What is the animal you want to keep in it? It isn't as easy as me saying which species would do well in them. If you have a strong established animal and you want to try it, try it. The point is, this hobby is your hobby. You can do what you like. I struggle with the idea of people leaving stuff to be dirty. Everything I've ever learned about reptile care and husbandry is continual maintenance. So every day, without fail, me or Paul, we do not have work experience kids, we do not have skivvies in our shop. We come in, we clean every water bowl, we take any soiled substrate out, we take any shed skins out, we clean the glass, we spray the animals that require it, and put fresh veg with the appropriate dusting on top for the animals that require it. Every single day, 365 days a year. If there's problems with a tank and it's soiled beyond repair, then it's cleaned out. It is wiped down with F10 disinfectant. It is then refilled with the appropriate substrate and the animals put back in. So that's our husbandry, and that's the way that, I suppose, for a combined 67, 68 years, me and Paul have always done it that way, and you're going to be hard pressed to get us to change. The idea of leaving snake shit in a viv for insects I've willfully put in there to eat and turn back round, to me is a bit of an alien concept. And on these bioactive pages, of which I'm a member of a few, I have seen some absolutely disgusting behaviour, leaving the carcasses of dead lizards in there for the isopods to enjoy, rotten and decaying food for the animals to enjoy. That to me is just an excuse to be dirty, and this is where I have a problem, because yes, the isopods will turn it round, but your background pathogen levels will increase to the point where potentially it's risky. Plus it stinks, it's minging, and it's horrible. Dirty bastards, get your tanks cleaned, you know. I don't see an excuse for it. I think it's lazy. And to that end, I think I also see a disconnect between a lot of these guys who purportedly sort of are trying to advance husbandry, and they go mad for all the lighting systems and the rain systems and the plants and the soils and all this gear, and then they don't even advocate the use of thermostats. And when challenged on it, I was like, oh, I've been doing it 20 years and I just sort of balance it out and I use big tanks. So you have control to the minusculest variable for lighting, humidity, airflow, plants, all the rest of it, but when it comes to controlling a thermostat and controlling the temperature within your viv, you're not that bothered, or you think that you can wing it and just let the room control it. To me, that's just craziness. It doesn't make any sense. What I made mention of earlier as well is that, say for example you go down your local garden centre, or if it's America, I suppose Walmart, or over here B&Q or Wickes or someone like that, the home base, and you go to garden centre, you pick some plants, so whether they be the Guzmania bromeliads, devil's ivy, pothos. You could use any of the ferns. So any of that sort of stuff, and you're going to put it in. Now, do we know whether they need ericaceous soil or standard mixed soil? If you're using succulents, they almost certainly need a grit mixed soil. So at which point, what's the pH level of your soil, and which plants should you put in it? It isn't as easy as that, like as you think, oh well, let's put a full spectrum light on it. Yeah, but unfortunately different plants require different levels of light. So your succulents and your cacti need it cracking the flags with light incredibly bright, far brighter than say a bromeliad, which is a shade dweller, or a fern, which is a shade dweller, or a hosta, which is a shade dweller, growing and doing well. So at which point, how do we create nature? You're not recreating nature. Sorry to break it to you. What you're doing is making a living tank that you intend to put a snake in. You've not recreated shit. That's the truth. You have taken some soil, some drainage balls, a bit of mesh, you've put it in a tank, you've planted some plants, you've tried to get them to root, you've used a few logs and stones to try and get those going. They seem to be doing okay. You've maybe gone out to your local woods, collected some leaf litter, and that'll have got some isopods and some wood lice and other things in that you can use, and they'll start turning the soil round and all the rest of it, and we think, great, that's fabulous. But then we've got a rainforest animal on deciduous forest leaf litter with deciduous forest isopods. They're working with different pathogens to the ones that were intended for the animals. How do we know that the pathogens we've introduced from our deciduous forest are not going to affect adversely our tropical animals? That's the question. And for me, it's a bit of a lottery, and those questions aren't really answered very much. All I see is, you've got to do it, you've got to do it, and people carry on as if they know what they're doing. For me, a lot of the time, bioactive is no better than pseudo-naturalism. Just because it's living does not make it any less pseudo-naturalistic. At least if I'm using a plastic Amapalo or mandarin or, you know, of any of these other leaves, they can be taken out, rinsed, washed. We can make sure that they're clean. I'm still to be won over. I'm not anti-bioactive. I'm, you know, I'm not one way or the other. We stock different substrates for them to set up. So we got like the BioLife there, which is a desert style bioactive substrate. We've got BioLife Forest. So it's not like I'm not stocking it, or it's not part of our sort of future design. We obviously have plants for people who want to do it. So we are ambivalent, shall we say. We'll let people, you know, just let people do what they want. I don't mind people experimenting, but when you're experimenting to then in the next breath say it's so much superior, it's better than anything I've ever done, I call bullshit. Sorry, I just do. Until I see definitive proof. You know, they're on about like cognitive health and all that sort of stuff, but that's just having logs and hides and different areas for them to go in. It's got nothing to do with whether you've got isopods trotting about in your substrate or not. How do they improve your cognitive health? You know, enrichment within a vivarium is not does not hinge on it being a bioactive installation. It can be pseudo-naturalistic and an intelligently designed vivarium. Best example I know of is a guy over in Ireland called Lawrence, who runs a place called Lark Pythons, and he uses pseudo-naturalistic enclosures. They're big, generously proportioned, intelligently put together, attractive vivarium installations, and they're pseudo-naturalistic. It's not a bioactive thing in them, and they challenge even the very best bios I've seen. So yeah, I'm just not 100% convinced. By all means, go for it, think about it. You set your tanks up well in advance of introducing your animals to make sure that any mold process has been gone through. We make sure that, I would always ensure that we're going to try and keep it as clean as possible. I do not agree with leaving carcasses and rubbish and shit all over the tank. For me, it's just dirty. I would go for sedentary animals, hunting snakes. are going to be all over the place. They're going to turn it upside down. You put a pine, a bull, a gopher, a rat, even a corn in a bio, it will turn it upside down. Especially if it's planted and made to look all nice and sexy. I mean, if it's just got bio substrate and then just branches and like platforms and things in, maybe. But if it's planted, then yeah, you're going to need to give those plants a really good length of time to be able to root in. And obviously it's going to need to be a plastic or glass tank, because the amount of water you have to introduce to be able to keep those plants going in quite an extreme box at 28-30 degrees at the warm end, you're going to need to be watering them fairly regularly, and we've got to allow for that. So I hope that's helpful. It's probably not the answer that you wanted. I mean, you know, everybody seems to be raving about it, but I'm a bit just standoffish about it. Not that I refuse to change, just that I don't probably know enough about it. I have questions which I still to see answered properly. So yeah, I'm still to be sold. I think an intelligent pseudo-naturalistic tank is easier to maintain and can look just as effective. We'll be back soon with another post. Cheers.